Miami Dolphins beat the San Francisco 49ers at home to keep the season alive, moving their record to 7-8 with 2 games remaining. And although it is very slim, this win does keep them in the hunt for the postseason amongst other teams as well. We'll talk about playoff scenarios and where everything stands at the end of today's show, but we will start by breaking down this game as the Dolphins held on to win 29-17. I will say this score is a little bit misleading, if you will. You would think the Dolphins were in control the entire time. They were not. They were in a dogfight with San Francisco the entire game, and it was only a Achane 50-yard touchdown with a minute and a half to go, where if Achane just slid and went to the ground, they could have kneaded out and won 22-17, but instead he ran it in and padded the stats and made it look better and hit the over. So congratulations if you had the over, and made the Dolphins go up 29-17 for the win. I think there's a lot to take away from this game. I think there really is. And I believe that this will show you the blueprint of how the Dolphins can get back to playing winning football. And although it might be too late for this season, you can look ahead to what is necessary for next season, as the Dolphins will try to have a bounce-back year next season in 2025. Tua Tagovailoa played a winning brand today. I don't think he was spectacular by any means, but solid completion percentage, didn't turn it over. It's really this simple, is that if you are the Dolphins and Tua does not turn the ball over, you're going to be in every game. Like, as long as Tua doesn't have those random turnover moments like he did last week against Houston, 3 interceptions, 1 fumble, like, you're not going to be out of any game. He played a clean game. He only put the ball in harm's way once. There was only one time where I thought it was like, okay, that was a bad decision. That might have been intercepted if the linebacker didn't have hands for feet, or feet for hands, I should say. But either way, he was efficient. This stat line would look a lot better if Tyreek Hill didn't drop 2 touchdowns. Not great. He threw a couple perfectly thrown balls that just went right through Tyreek's hand. I was not happy about that by any stretch of the imagination. He kind of was non-existent today. He had the 124-yard post route that got the field goals moving on a drive, and then caught a nice speed out on 3rd and goal at the 3-yard line, beating Charvarius Ward, a really good corner. And I do want to note that as well, by the way. Even though the passing game of Miami wasn't that good, the 49ers coming into this game allowed just 181 yards per game through the air this season. That was second best in the NFL. So you can look at this 2 ways and say, well, Tua's numbers weren't that great. Tyreek's numbers weren't that great. You were going against a really good cornerback room and safety room with Hufanga, Diamador Lenore, Charvarius Ward, Fred Warner over the middle of the field, and this offense was still able to move the ball for the most part. And I think that's the impressive thing, and it's the part where you're like, man, where was this last week against Houston? Although with the no offensive tackle situation, you wonder, it's like, man, if you had the same philosophy and same offense this week as you did last week, well, the Dolphins could be 8-7 right now and have to win out and could be in the postseason and not need any help. So that's the part that's a little bit frustrating, and we're going to talk about the run game in just a second. And that might be your biggest takeaway. It's probably my biggest takeaway, the run game. And we'll talk about Isaiah Wynn in particular here in just a second. But let me know what your biggest takeaway from this game was for the Miami Dolphins. Like I said, this number is going to be inflated. Achane with 121 yards, 50 of them coming on that halfback toss silencer touchdown where he could have just slid down after 10 yards and the game get kneed out. But regardless, even if it was just the 10-yard gain on first down and he slid and they needed out, it still would have been an 80-yard rushing game for Achane. And then you look at the total rushing yards from the Miami Dolphins, and this was one of the best rushing performances that we've seen this entire season. As a team, Miami ran the ball 29 times for 168 yards. That is 5.8 yards per carry. Obviously, like I'm going to continue to mention, inflated by the 50-yard touchdown at the end, but they also had the touchdown. So why is this the biggest takeaway in my opinion? It's because it's very clear. When the Dolphins can run the football, their offense is sustainable, and it looks like a competent NFL offense. Like, remember the 2-game stretch where even though the Dolphins lost, a lot of us were optimistic about the rest of the season when they lost back-to-back games going against the Cardinals and Bills. They scored 27 in each of those 2 games and still lost. But we were like, well, The rushing game is good. They ran for 130 against the Cardinals. They ran for 150 against the Bills. It's like if you can combine the rushing attack of 100-plus yards on a consistent basis with Achane, Jalen Wright, Mostert, with the play-action passing game, that's where these linebackers, these safeties, have to bite on those play fakes. And then you get the speed of Waddle and Tyreek Hill going down the field and creating those explosive plays that have really lacked this season. But after those 2 games, and starting from Week 10 to Week 15, those games between the Rams on Monday Night Football and the Texans last week, in those games, they averaged just 57.1 yards per game on the ground. When you're averaging just 57 yards rushing a game, your offense is one-dimensional, and it is just so reliant and burdens Tua Tagovailoa to where he knows he has to play perfect. He knows he has to beat you by himself through the air. And then it also makes Mike McDaniel say, well, we can't run the football. We have to find a way not to just make Tua drop back every week. And that's why the Dolphins run so many screens to Devon Achane, Malik Washington, Tyreek Hill, Jonnu Smith, and the offense becomes stagnant and predictable. When you could run the football and average 5.8 yards per carry, mix in Jeff Wilson on short yardages, 2 carries for 12 yards. He had those 2 opportunities. He performed well in what Miami needed. Get what you got out of Raheem Mostert, couple big runs, as well as the Devon Achane show. That is where this offense becomes multidimensional, incredibly difficult to stop, and you're able to put up yardage and put up points against good teams. The 49ers, even though they are now 6-9, and they shot themselves quite a bit on the foot with penalties and their inability to move the ball on offense at times, their defense is still top 10 in the NFL. 3rd in yards per game allowed, 2nd in passing yards allowed, top 15, top 16 in rushing yards per allowed. And you put up a really good day, totaled nearly 400 yards. I mean, you just can't complain about anything the Dolphins did today. It's truly awesome to watch, which is why, like, when you look to the offseason, that is the number one thing. Just get the interior offensive line figured out so you could run the football more efficiently. Like, that's the key here. That's how you get better in a more sustained, confident offense. Fix the left guard and right guard spot. And maybe you see enough from Isaiah Wynn over the last 3 weeks. Isaiah Wynn started over Liam Eichenberg. Eichenberg got benched in this game. Well, he didn't get benched. He didn't start. He got benched in between the week. Eichenberg down, Wynn in. Coincidence that the Dolphins have their best rushing game in the past month and a half, 2 months? I don't think so, folks. I think Isaiah Wynn will be your starting right guard moving forward. Now, with that being said, Eichenberg did have to come in and play. Wynn left the game a couple times due to injury, or maybe he was on a pitch count because this is his first action since last season when he had that quad/knee injury. First time he's played in a game since being activated off the PUP list. I expect him to be the starter moving forward, assuming he is not injured, and I think the Dolphins need to continue to start him at right guard. And maybe he plays well enough in the final 2 weeks where the Dolphins say, hey, you played really well. Maybe we'll give you one more chance at left guard or right guard next season. Still go out and maybe sign a top-tier guard in free agency or draft one in the first 2 rounds. But you at least give a Wynn another chance to prove himself next season if he plays well in the final 2 games like he did today. All right, last thing we'll talk about before we move on to the defense. Or, excuse me, the playoffs. Well, I'm going to say 2 things here. One, Jonnu Smith. Congratulations to him. Led the Dolphins in receiving today, 6 catches, 62 yards. He set a franchise record today. He has the most receptions out of any tight end in one season, Dolphins history. Shout out to Jonnu. It's not the only stat that he broke. Most yards by a tight end in Dolphins history, single season. So now Jonnu Smith leads the Dolphins record books in receptions in 1 year, as well as yards. Shout out to Jonnu Smith. Spam those 9s down below. And make sure you are subscribed to the channel because we are still breaking down content on the Miami Dolphins. Dolphins playoff hopes are still alive. So we'll break down news leading up to week 6 or 17 against the Cleveland Browns, all playoff hypotheticals and scenarios for the Fins entering the final 2 weeks. All right, one last thing before we talk about the playoff path for Miami. Jevon Holland, Jordan Poyer. Even though you only allowed 17 points today, the 1 touchdown in the first half you allowed, Deebo Samuel slant, he catches it at the 7-8 yard line, runs through both Jordan Poyer and Jevon Holland touchdown. Those 2 stink. They can't come back. They legitimately, they both should be not wearing Dolphins uniforms next year. Jevon Holland will be a top 5 sought-after free agent this offseason. That's how bad the free agency class is. I am not paying him more than $15 million per year. If he wants to come back for 3 for $45, yes. But if he wants 4 for 80 or 4 for 74, I'm good, man. You go do you. I'll allot that cap space and potential money to an offensive lineman or a cheaper safety that might be able to give you the same production. Kind of out on that. All right, let's finish up with the playoffs for the Fins. 7-8, right? Best you can do is 9-8. When you look around the standings in the NFL, Ravens got the 10 wins this week, so you can't catch them. The only two teams you can catch are the Denver Broncos and Los Angeles Chargers. So, simple as this. You need the Chargers or Broncos to lose out and the Dolphins to win out. The Dolphins win out, one of those two teams loses out, you'll both have 9 wins. The Dolphins do have the tiebreaker over both of those teams. So, if you are able to get the 9 wins and the Chargers and Broncos stall, you can catch them. Broncos' final 2 games. In Cincinnati next week, and then in Week 18, they play the Kansas City Chiefs. So it's not difficult to imagine the Denver Broncos losing out, assuming the Bengals can win at home next week. But the key is you need the Chiefs to care about Week 18. The Chiefs play on Christmas against the Steelers. Every Dolphins fan in America should be rooting for the Steelers to win that game because the Chiefs can clinch the number 1 overall seed with a win on Wednesday. And if they do that, well, they are not going to play anyone in Week 18, which means Denver is likely going to easily beat a Chiefs team that isn't trying or playing their starters, and Denver will not lose out. Flip over to the Chargers. They play the Patriots in New England on Saturday, and they play the Raiders in Week 18. Probably very unlikely that the Chargers lose those 2 games. Both of them they have to lose, considering both those teams are 3-win teams and in the top 6 of the NFL draft, although the Raiders did beat the Jaguars. So the Dolphins need to win out. They need one of those 2 teams that we just mentioned to lose out. And there's one more thing Miami needs, which is almost the most scary part of it all. You need the Colts to lose one of their final 2 games because they have the tiebreaker over you due to head-to-head. The 2 games they play against the Colts, against the Jaguars. Easier schedule than the Chargers playing the Raiders and Patriots. It's not great. Slim chance, but there is still a chance. Which is why you need to subscribe to the channel because we're going to be dropping content this entire week. Even though it's the holiday season, we're not going anywhere. We'll actually have a Christmas Eve special on Dolphins Today. We'll be live with Cullen Brown on Tuesday afternoon. So hit that sub button, join us, and look out for the content we're putting out tomorrow as well on Overreaction Monday.